Hey, Patrice here. So, you've probably been seeing on YouTube these storytime videos that YouTubers are doing. So, I'm just like, hey, why not? I do my own storytime videos. Not gonna post a whole lot. I'm gonna have different story times. This story time is about my experience with going to two different public schools at two different times. So, uh, yeah. There'll be another one where I talk about where I was very close to going to private school. That's for a later time. It's an interesting story, but that's for a later date. So let's get started, shall we? So when I was very little, I lived in a rural area for a while. Up until after my grandfather retired from teaching after 30 some years of teaching high school. My grandfather was actually an English teacher as well as a theater teacher at an all-boys private school in Salzburg, Pennsylvania. Uh, if you're from that area, you probably know what private school I'm talking about. He was a teacher at Kiski Prep from, like, I think 1991 until 2002. I don't remember what year he started teaching at Kiski, but all I know is he started teaching at Kiski in the early 90s. Before then, he taught at a different private school, and then he's just been teaching at different private schools for years. I think he taught at one charter school and one, as well as one public school, but I'm not sure. I gotta ask him. But I've heard he taught at a charter school, but that's a little off topic. So I lived in Salzburg, Pennsylvania, from infancy until after second grade. And the reason why I lived there for so long was because my mother, when she separated from my dad, I was a baby, and the divorce wasn't finalized. So I lived on the campus at Kiski Prep pretty much ever since I was a baby. I wasn't even one yet. I was like, oh gosh, I don't know how many months old I was. I was a baby. That's all I know. So I pretty much lived on the campus up until my grandfather retired. And my mother and I lived with my grandparents because my father never really bothered to take care of me. So the people who really raised me were my mother and my grandparents on my mom's side, and my Oma, who sadly died when I was after I turned 18. She raised me, and I guess my Opa, who's not related to me by blood, but is my step grandfather, kind of helped too. So my father was not in the picture, but his mother was. So I went to an elementary school that was a public school that was part of a merged school district at the time. They're still merged. So I remember when I went to that elementary school, there wasn't really anything political about the school. There wasn't ever talk about politics or, anything controversial. at the school. Uh, the school that I went to, though, the elementary school there, if you looked at the playground, a lot of people would probably think that I went to a poor school, because the playground was so small. I don't recall any swings. All I remember was there was a wooden train, which was fun, but you had to be careful because there was always a wasp's nest in there. There would always be some kind of wasp's nest, and wasps are the devil. So there was that train thing there that kids would go play in and have their own little imagination, and there would be a slide. We didn't have any swings because our playground was small and we had trailers, well, modulars for the 4th, 5th, and 6th graders. Because the public school that I went to, the elementary school went through K through 6, and the junior high went from, well, the middle, they now call middle school, but back then it was called junior high. The grades were 7th through, I think 7th through 8th. Maybe it was 7th through 9th, I don't remember. So, I went to that elementary school from kindergarten until after I left 2nd grade, until after my grandfather retired. Now, because I went to that school in 2nd grade, I got out before the school I was going to go to when my grandfather retired. So, my last day of school was around June 4th in 2002, and that's when we were moving to Pittsburgh. Now, with the rules and regulations of us staying on the campus when my grandfather retired, we had to get out, I believe it was a day or two, like the day after or a few days after the graduation, I don't know. But what happened was we started moving our stuff to the new place when I was done at the school that I originally went to. And I remember having the tour of the new school, and this public school, things were different. The elementary school that I went to from 3rd grade until 5th grade was grades K through 5th. And then I continued going to that school district up until I graduated. Now, what was different about this school was not the fact that there was a bigger playground, but they actually had a field that we would have our field day, but now that has actually been turned into another school because of the growth that happened. And this school was much smaller than my old school. The student population was much smaller. I'm not going to say like smaller, like the playground being smaller kind of thing. So I went from going to a larger school district to a much smaller school district when I was a kid. So what was different about these two schools? I didn't really have much experience at the one school because I was only there until 2nd grade, so I couldn't really say if things were political. Like, I can't really say if things in the middle school or high school there were political or not because I've never experienced middle school and high school there, but I have at this school. But at this school that I went to, all of most of the kids that were in my grade seemed to be very, very political, in a way, like at the age of 8 and 9 years old. And I'm just like, this is strange, because when I was in kindergarten through second grade at my school, none of the kids from grades, sorry, I've been up all night. None of the kids from grades K through 6 were political. So, yeah. But what was also different about this school that I went to was, in order to join a concert band, you had to be in the 4th grade. While at the school that I went to before, you had to be in 5th grade. Now, when I was in elementary school, in 3rd grade through 5th grade at this other school, everyone had to do choir because it was part of the music class. So everyone had to do choir except for the kindergartners. However, when I went to the other school, the only people who did choir were 4th, 5th, and 6th graders. And they broke up into the sections that you would in your typical choir. But I remember we had to go to all of the choir concerts at the elementary school, even if you were not in and that was at both elementary schools. Even though I wasn't in choir in the one school, I still had to go to the concerts because it was required for everyone to go to the concert because the concert was in the daytime. Same thing with, well, actually, grades 4th through 5th had 2 concerts in the elementary school. We had one in the daytime for the kids, where it was a all combined concert, grades 1st through 5th, including the band, which I was involved in. And there was one at night where it was strictly grades 4 through 5th. So I had to do both concerts. Concerts when I was in 4th and 5th grade. When I got to middle school, that's where the politics got worse, because in elementary school, you know, kids would just be like, "Oh, you're a Democrat, talk to the hand, oh, we don't want to play with you," or, "Oh, you're a Republican, talk to the hand, we don't want to play with you," that kind of stuff. And then they would just hug and make up afterwards and play dodgeball and just do goofy kid things. But then when I got into middle school, that's where the politics got worse. And, you know, kids started being cruel, not towards me, but towards, like, not towards just me in particularly, but towards everyone. But of course, middle schoolers are cruel anyways. But I'm not talking about like the typical rumors or teasing kind of thing, like that kind of cruelty. I'm talking about political, where they were just so political that they were absolutely even more cruel to each other, and they were cruel to other people. So when I was in 8th grade, I notice I'm skipping the other 2 grades because That's not where the worst things happened to me in public school. When I was in the 8th grade, I had this one teacher that I absolutely loved. She was pregnant at the time, so she was getting ready to go on maternal leave. Okay, and I absolutely loved this teacher. She was the best. She was actually one of my favorite teachers in middle school, and I had her for about 2.5 years. So she was amazing. She actually, when I came into school with a sprained ankle and was on crutches, she actually was very supportive. She made sure my foot was elevated. And she actually tutored me in math and helped me get better in math. And if it wasn't for her, I probably would have not gone into regular algebra and going at their pace, at other students' pace. Yes, I was in learning support for a while in math because that's the one subject I really struggled in. And if it wasn't for this teacher who I had, I probably would not have gone into that math class in high school. So thank you. And I was really sad that she left, and there was this new teacher, and I had suspicions about her because she looked like she freshly got out of getting her bachelor's. And at first I thought she was a student teacher, but she wasn't. She was going to be our new teacher at the time. And, you know, I thought at first she was really chill. And this teacher that I had in the 8th grade was absolutely, in my eyes, completely evil. And here's the reason why I did not like her. So, when we were in our one class with learning support class at the end of the month, because we had students from all walks of life in that class, we had people who only had like problems in math and reading to people who had an intellectual disability. So everyone in the learning support program in that particular class, at the end of the month, they did a movie. And majority of the class wanted to watch Harry Potter. Now, how the school rules were was in the elementary school, we could only watch stuff that was rated G. In the middle school, we could only watch stuff that was G and PG. If we were to watch something that was PG-13, we had to have a letter signed by the parents to say that it was okay. So we wanted to watch Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. I think it was Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone we wanted to watch. And the teacher and the assistant flat out said no. And the teacher that was in charge said, "This is a Christian classroom." And we were in a public school. And the fact that this teacher said that this is a Christian classroom, it put me in shock. Because I wasn't baptized. I never went to church. I didn't even identify as a Christian. You know, I wasn't even involved with the religion. So I remember telling my mom about this, and my mom made me, and I remember my mom made me go straight to the principal's office at, I think it was It was before the middle schoolers got into. It's before the middle school buses came in. So what happened was, my mom would drive me during the time where the high schoolers just arrived. Just arrived to the high school. And she took me to the middle school to speak with the guidance counselor and the principal. So I did that. And I told them what happened. They gave a warning to the teacher, and the teacher gave me a detention for lying when there were witnesses there saying that she did say this and that she did violate the law by saying that the room was automatically a Christian classroom, which violates the First Amendment separation of church and state. And I still got detention for it, and I got accused for hating Christians because I reported this teacher for saying this is a Christian classroom, and I got accused for hating Christians ever since 8th grade because I reported a teacher for saying that. Then there was a time where she continued bringing up stuff that was very suspicious and questionable, and I would report her for that, and it came to the point where she threw a calculator at me during the standardized testing, and she denied that to my grandmother's face and to the principal's face, but there were witnesses who said, from what I've been told by another student that was a witness to that, that there were witnesses that came up and said that this teacher did in fact throw a calculator at me during the standardized testing. So, yeah. So, 8th grade was hell for me because, one, this teacher absolutely, I hated this teacher and this teacher hated me. And two, the teacher was absolutely just horrible at her job. There was actually a time where during my social studies class, they called it civics. It was like a political class for 8th graders, but it wasn't like too political. So we did like debate papers, and my papers was in favor of gay couples adopting, and the teacher wanted me to change my topic to being against same-sex couples adopting and same-sex marriage when I was in 8th grade, and I did not want to change my paper because I do not believe in discrimination, and she wanted me to bring up religion. So I went against my teacher's wishes and got another detention for talking back when I just refused to write what she wanted me to write because we had to write based on our own opinion, not what others wanted us to write. So my teacher wanted me to change my opinion. But things got better in high school because the teachers I had, we actually were lucky enough to meet our teachers before school started. So I remember, I think it was end of July or beginning of August. I don't remember. Please, if you went to my high school, correct me if I'm wrong. But we got to go get our schedules for school, and tried to find our classroom so we don't get lost, because high school is a big, scary place where it's easy to get lost, where I went to school. So we would go in, and I met my teachers, and the teachers actually heard a lot of good stuff about me, which shocks me because 8th grade was my worst year in middle school. And they heard about me and all, so they heard good things about me, and they actually heard how I'm like how I was like one of the nicest people and one of the greatest, like one of their best students or something. So that happened, and I was shocked because I was afraid that this teacher that I had in 8th grade said negative stuff about me, but that teacher was fired, so, and to this day, she still accuses my mother of getting her fired when other parents complained about her. So, yeah. But in high school, things were better. However, when I came out, and I didn't come out as trans at the time, I came out as a lesbian, because I'm attracted to women, but I've always identified as a guy. That's a story for another time. But when I first came out, that was not on purpose, because what happened was, I'm not gonna say in this video, I'll say in another storytime video, but we'll just say something happened, and I ended up being forced to come out as a lesbian when I was like 15, turning 16 years old. This was like the 2009-2010 season. So yeah, and after that, I went through hell with bullying and all. And then it wasn't until when I was a senior, I did like a running for president campaign. And I talked about equality, and I talked about dignity and treating people with respect and economics and all. And talked about being a member of the queer community. And I actually had a lot of support after the bullies either graduated or transferred, and been told that I was so brave. So yeah, then when I graduated, I just remembered saying, thank God I'm out of there, because everything, like in high school and middle school, things were so political. There was like a lot of hell going on between the marching band and the school board. That's another story for later as well. I'm not going to go into too much details in this story, because there's a lot of details that should be in separate videos. So I'll tell those stories in a later time. But there was like a lot of political shit. Excuse my French. If you don't like cussing, I apologize. That went on between the school board and the arts programs, and there was a lot of political stuff with the parents and the school board, and there were a lot of political heat between teachers and political stuff between students and teachers. So I'll talk about the political stuff in another video of like some of the political controversy that happened. As you can see, I did bring up the 8th grade one because I felt that was an important one to talk about, because that's part of the public school that I've experienced. And that teacher that threw the calculator at me in the 8th grade actually was actually a person from a religious institution. that, well, at that time, like the school district in the middle school and high school levels, because we had students in alternative education that were attending like alternative. It's hard to explain. It's like these kids get arrested for violence and all, or they're taken away by the state from their families, or the families put them in there. It's not foster care, but these kids are like ordered this education by a judge, and a lot of these kids that were in this program were people who were kids that were arrested, that were juvenile delinquents. I don't know what you call them. I think it's called alternative education. So the school that I went to, we had a lot of kids that were in that alternative education program. Most of them were actually there not necessarily for violence, but were there because of family reasons, because they were we'll just say they were taken away by the state and put into this program. And some of them board, some of them didn't. But they were a part of this program. And so the teacher that I had was a part of the group that did the alternative education, where they also did learning support for people with disabilities. So it's hard to explain because this place was like a dormitory kind of thing, for where they had people where they had kids that were orphans and kids that were abused by their parents, that were taken away by their parents, and there's like they're in custody by the state, and there were people there, kids there that were, they're still people, but there were kids there that were also juvenile delinquents sharing the same housing, which a lot of people think was not a really good idea, because a lot of the incidents that happened there ended up, there were violent incidences there, with stories in the news, and also I had friends that were over there that told me these stories. So yeah, pretty much was not a good place to be. And they had like people that worked at that facility that taught at the school that I went to, that were hired as teachers there for learning support, because I guess they needed to have a certain amount of teachers there, and they didn't have enough. I don't know, but there were they were mostly there to make sure that the kids were in line, but this teacher was a sub until like June of 2008. So it's really confusing. I can't go into full detail because it's a really confusing thing, because they had orphans. They had people who were orphans that were living in their dorms kind of thing. They had people who were abused by their parents, who were inpatients there. They had people who were convicted of crimes of violent crimes there. So it's really confusing. That place has actually changed now. From what I've been told, they no longer have that because of they no longer have that, and I think it's because of the negative media attention they had too. So yeah, it's just a really confusing story that I'll probably never bring up in a story time video. But yeah, that's the story of my experience with public school, uh, attending 2 different public schools. Most of the story was about the one. I'll probably do another story. I'll definitely be doing some story times of some of the political stuff that went on at that school that I went to, such as stuff with the marching band and other things as well, because there was a lot of political controversies going on at that school. There was a lot of, there was a lot of, you know, negativity regarding to politics and all. So yeah, hope you enjoyed this video and see you next time.